Okay, we're gonna do a little bit more work on the mower. Although not gonna bring it up here today because I don't need to. So if you recall, when on the last, I think it was the last video, on the barn video, I had mentioned that the mower had turned into a cluster, a fuster cluck. So these green rock guards were obviously the original ones that I got the first go around, because they're advertised as for a 7/16 thick bar, which is what my bar is. And then you put them on there and they're too short by just a little bit, and they really don't fit well at all. The hole is the bolt hole is slightly too far forward, and just really just not very well fit. Okay, so I send all those back other than this one, because I had to modify it to make it fit before I knew that they didn't fit. So I sent everything back and got the guards for a 1/2-inch bar, because you add in the thickness of the ledger plate, you're up to a 1/2-inch bar, and if these are too short, then with the ledger plate on, then 2 and 2 is 4. You get one for a 1/2-inch bar. It should be high enough. So those guards show up. Those guards are too tall, which this guard, if you lay a straight edge off of the knife ledger and measure down to the mounting surface here, it's 7/16. Okay, 7/16 bar. The ones that they advertise for a 1/2-inch bar, you lay a straight edge off the ledger plate and measure down, it's 5/8. How's a 5/8 guard fit a 1/2-inch bar? So those were way too tall. And same deal, the hole on those was even further forward yet, and they didn't fit for shit. And if you did get them pulled up tight, which I managed to get one of them pulled up tight, they'd sit on the bar and they were rocked down like this. So if you got the cutter bar in, you were going to be touching back here at the bottom of at the back of the knife ledger, and you were going to be, 1/8 of an inch off up here at the tip. It's kind of hard to cut anything when your guard, or when your knife isn't laying flat on your knife ledger. So at that point, I was getting frustrated. Sent everything back, because obviously it ain't gonna work, which has me thinking that these are actually indeed for a 7/16 bar. They are just so piss poorly manufactured, because it's probably the finest crap that India can produce. But they're just so poorly manufactured to such poor tolerance, they just flat out won't work. I mean, they might work if you're using it as like a roadside mower and you're not cared about cutting fast or quality of cut. But if you're using it for an actual hay mower, they ain't gonna work, because you're gonna have to pull down or push down on your knife bar so hard to get it to lay flat on that ledger. You're gonna create so much heat and friction and wear out your bar, if you can even get it to move without being stuck. So the only way we could have seen to make these work was you would have had to made a jig that used this knife ledger as a datum for flat, and you would have had to put every one of these things up in the mill and went through with an end mill and milled this off flat to get it to suck up square to the bar so that everything would work right. Because if you went through and did that and got everything flat and square, by the time it pulled up square to the bar, it probably actually would have been right, which makes me think that these are indeed for a 7/16 bar. They're just so poorly manufactured, they don't fit right. Now, in the book, they tell you if you run into a situation like that where you have a guard that's tipped up or tipped down, you shove a piece of pipe over it, and you literally just take the guard and you bend it up or down, which you can do with the original guards, because these are drop forged. And right here, the way they are formed, they're bendable within reason. These are cast, they are cast steel. They're a really poor quality of cast steel, but because they're cast and because they have this webbing right here in this throat zone, if you try to bend that up or down, you're going to crack it and break it. So you can't bend them to align them. So anyway, garbage. That's all I got to say about that. So on to the next plan. So these are obviously my original guards. I didn't throw them out. The ledger knife in these is replaceable. And actually on the back page of the book, there was actually a jig that you could buy through Oliver. Although I'm thinking that everybody uses the same jig, because if you look up the parts book for a John Deere number 5 mower, the John Deere jig is identical. But there was a jig that you could use. It was actually for working on the sickle bar itself and the guards, but you would lay the guard in and it would cradle the guard, and you could drive this rivet out, and then you flipped the guard over on a different part of the jig, and there was a peg that stuck up and went through the saddle right here and supported this rivet, and you put a new ledger knife on with this upside down, peen the rivet over, and you literally just replaced the knives in your guards until your guards were wore out, and then you just replace the whole guard. Well, my guards still have some life in them, so I started hunting around for ledger knives and couldn't really find anything aftermarket that I trusted to order enough in quantity of to do everything. So I guess out of curiosity, I called it Mower. And I had a part number for a Massey Ferguson ledger knife, because I figured, you know, how many versions of this could there be made through different manufacturers? It turns out there's a few, there's more than a few. So all of them I was finding were about 1/8 of an inch too short. 1/8 to 3/16 too short, so they wouldn't fit. So the Massey one wouldn't fit, and just out of curiosity, I asked the girl, it was Emily, that one of the girls that works the counter there, who is actually pretty good at this, asked her if they had any parts books for an 82 mower, and sure as shit, they had a parts book for it. And she looked up the part number, and Mower had 9 original Oliver ones on the shelf. You can see they're genuine Oliver, still got the stamping in them. They had 9 of them on the shelf, and there was 140 something more in Parts Warehouse. So I got all new old stock Oliver knives to rebuild my rock guards. And these knives are the stationaries that go out on the crop divider on the end of the bar. And there's actually one more it's a great big honking thing. It's a wear plate / knife that goes down on the drive head section. But I was already winning too much, and I wasn't going to push my luck and see if that was available. So I've got to get a parts book for this mower, and I'm going to do some more digging and see if we can't come up with some more new old stock stuff for it. And I'm going to see if I can come up with a new old stock set of guards for it, so that, because I bought enough knives to do the whole mower twice if need be, plus have a couple spares, and it'd be nice to have one full set of rock guards for it, so that when these finally wear out, or if I manage to break one, we got new old stock rock guard for it, so we don't got to fight with this aftermarket junk, which I don't know how they can get away with making them that shitty, because what makes or breaks a sickle mower as far as speed of cut and quality of cut is how well the register is on the knives and the guards. And if the register is shit, it ain't gonna cut. So you need good guards. The guards are honestly probably more important than the knives. So how can you, I don't know. So anyway, This was our test subject to see how hard they were to get apart. But they just go in there, probably gonna have to do some cleaning because they were kind of dirty, but they just go in there like that and fall down over that keeper. And then you drive your rivet in and peen it over. Which these have enough wear in them, I'm probably gonna have to put a chamfer on these so that the rivet has something to peen into so it won't just drive back out the other side. But anyhow, that's enough explanation. So I guess we'll start knocking knives apart, or guards apart. It'd be nice to find the actual jig for doing this, because honestly the rivets don't drive out that hard. Somewhere somebody's got one sitting on a shelf and they just have no clue what it is. Because getting a good hit is key. Honestly, it wouldn't be that bad to drive them out the other way, but you can't see them until they start to move. And there's no real good, yeah, you kind of, yeah, there's not really a good way to hold them that way unless you had the jig, and then you could very easily hold them that way, but and you get your rivet. And then they're a little stuck from time, but with a little bit of finagling. And your ledger knife comes out, and that's scrap, and you clean this up and reuse it. Okay, this is my last one. I started pre-drilling the heads because I must have jinxed myself when I said they drove out fairly easy, and I had a couple of them get ornery and the heads swelled up, and it was a little bit of a project to get them to come out. But you drill the head off for the most part and they come right apart. So there's that. Okay, I got the guards. Had to clean all that cavity out in there. It was all full of dirt. So the next thing I got to do, and I've already started, is put a little chamfer on the bottom of the hole, because there's enough of the bottom of the guard wore off that the original chamfer's gone. That gives something for the rivet to swedge into, or swell up and swedge into. That way it, because the way it is right now, if you just drive or swedge the rivet, you'll get a head on it, but the head can just wear off and then the rivet can just go back through the hole. So you put a chamfer on it, and that gives the rivet something to swell up into that can't, at least without going over a bunch of acres, immediately wear off. So simple enough. Okay, so in order to be able to do a decent and consistent job of riveting these and to be able to hold everything tight, I'm going to have to make a jig. So I went down and got me some steel. And basically I'm going to be able to use this for my driver pin, or well, my backup pin, which will be welded into this hole. And then this will slip up in here to give something to back up the ledger plate itself, and then this will get welded like so, so that everything's it'll all end up like that. So I'm gonna go ahead and throw this together real quick and see if we can get some of these riveted together. Okay, this is what I came up with. Had to stack it like that because when you put the guard on there, you don't want to be hitting on the top there. And then Dad's got a hole here in the bench he uses to mount a bench mount tube bender, and it slides down in there. And I screwed up. I should not have put them weld beads right there. I realized that mistake after the fact, but it actually holds it nice and tight in there, so maybe it wasn't a mistake. So I guess we'll see if we can set a couple rivets, eh? Now these are long. They should be about an 1/8 inch shorter, so I'm just going to take a grinder and we'll scuff some of that rivet off before we set it. So it's going to be a little bit of trial and error as to how much has to come off, but we shall see. I do have 100 or so rivets, so we got room to make mistakes if need be. I'd say it's just about right. Not too bad. And I put, because these rivets are inset just a tad into the knife, I did machine that little nub in there, which doesn't stick up nearly as far as I thought, but it does stick up a little. So, and it works because you can see the little doink it put in the top of the rivet. So, I think we got a system. Okay, I've got a few done now, kind of got a system down. These are not, I'm sure if you had a jig or whatever special tools you needed to do this, it would be easier to get them in. But by the witness marks that are here in this cavity, they were obviously somewhat of a press fit to begin with, so I'm assuming that there was probably a special driver, although the book doesn't mention it. But I do have to just in order to make them go in a little better, trim that tongue on the front just a hair. Oops. And then they go right on. But you don't obviously want to take off so much that you lose your press fit. My guards keep falling. And then a couple of them, the rivets go in not quite flush, so just scuff them with the sander to get the lip off of there. So that's pretty much the process. Well, that worked pretty darn good, I dare say. Now I just need to come up with a jig for holding it to knock them out. Although, hopefully we don't have to do that again for many moons would be ideal. Add that to the pile of custom tools we got floating around here for doing this kind of dumb stuff. All that screwing around with all that new junk just to turn around and fix the old stuff. Which I probably would have opted to do this right off the bat, except for you like to try to find modern parts to replace the stuff with. That way you don't have to rely on new old stock, because eventually the new old stock's going to dry up. So you like to try to find the modern replacement parts so that you can just buy modern replacement parts. And unfortunately, it rings true that they don't make stuff like they used to. So be nice if we could at least make it here. Because I guarantee you that's where the mother guards came from. I guarantee you they came from India, Indonesia, somewhere over. I guarantee you they weren't made here. And if they were, man, somebody needs to get their shit together on tolerances and gauges and whatnot. So, but unfortunately, we're still waiting on parts because I got all new bolts for these. And they're 7/16, and our bolt supplier does not stock 7/16 carriage bolts, because apparently they don't, and nobody uses them anymore. So they won't be here till Monday. But I have a couple new used tires to put on the mower, because there's one on there that's getting pretty flaky. So I'll probably do that tomorrow afternoon. We'll see what I got for time, because I got to go pick some stuff up. But anyway, regardless, we'll catch you tomorrow or Friday, depending on when I get back to this thing. So until then. Okay, it's Friday. The weather kind of took a crap on us. I went and got a haircut last night, and I kind of regret it, because now my head's cold. It was like up lower 50s most of the week, and then late last night the temperature tanked and we started getting freezing rain and some snow, and then I think it's supposed to warm back up again. But anyway, tires. So where this thing, the side of the tire, whatever you want to call it, or you can't have a side on a circle, but the part of the tire that was down when this thing was sitting obviously is getting flaky, and I think this one's even worse yet. Yeah, this one's the scarier one of the two. And I'm pretty sure that when I would almost would have had to have been, but it's been 10, 11 years ago now. I can't remember. Well, I bought this stuff in 12, or after, I guess it would have been in 13, because I used the money we made in 12 to buy everything. So however it worked out, I'm pretty sure these were flat, and we had to air them back up. They almost would have had to have been. I can't believe they wouldn't have been. But the shitty part is, and the only place, I haven't looked at Miller, but even if they had them, I doubt I'd want to pay for them. You can't. These are what the book calls a heavy-duty smooth tread wheelbarrow tire. You can't get these anymore, and any wheelbarrow tire you get is garbage. So, and the only thing you can get in this 4x8 anymore that I know of is you can get like the 3-rib tires, or the wavy tread tires that they put on the front of garden tractors. Or obviously you can still get a 4x8 wheelbarrow tire, but they ain't gonna work on this. They're not heavy enough. Or you can get a 4x8 trailer tire, which is what I have on the back of the hay rake, and they just don't look right. I don't like them. So many moons ago, back when I was still in college, knowing that I wanted to put, or was going to have to put tires on this at some point, it was actually the guy that I bought my 2255 from. He was cleaning out his shop, and this was before the 2255 showed up here, but anyway, he was cleaning out his shop / storage shed, because they kind of serve both purposes. or it kind of served both purposes. And he gave me a bunch of Oliver planter parts and some, he gave me a bunch of stuff. Can't even remember what all it was. I brought home a whole pickup load of crap from there. But he had these. Some BFG Silvertowns, which I think is actually what these are. Are these BFGs or no? These are Firestones. But they were on a what would have been like a dolly wheel, a tandem dolly wheel for a planter hitch to pull behind a 3-point field cultivator. If anybody's ever seen those, they kind of had like a gooseneck type thing, and then the dolly wheels rode on the ground with a hitch off the back so you could hook to it, and when you pick the field cultivator up, and you know, yada yada yada. And they are actually, because they were deflated, in fairly decent shape. The sidewalls do have some cracking in them, but they're not terrible. And the tread on them, because they were deflated, but they didn't have any weight on them, so they didn't squat. The tread, whatever you want to call it, since they're smooth, is actually in pretty decent shape. So I mean, as long as the sidewalls hold up, which they should, because they're not really carrying a whole lot of weight. The most weight they're going to see is probably the tongue weight off of the crimper if I ever decide to pull them in tandem, which, you know, might happen. But anyway, those are decent tires yet, so those can go on here, and these can get shit canned. So I got tubes. Oh, and update on where were they? Oh, I threw in a scrap hopper. These guys, thought they were from India. Went to Rural King to get tubes the other day, and just so happened to walk down the aisle where they have all the Mower parts, and Rural King sells us exact same 700 casting number rock guard sticker, made in China. So they're the finest garbage that that China can provide. Go figure. So anyhow, gonna get these off. This could be rather interesting because this thing's kind of a limp noodle just sitting here as a tripod. But pretty simple. There's just, you undo this cotter pin, and it's a captured pin here, and you run that nut off and it should drive out. And then I'm assuming that there's probably just sealed roller bearing or sealed ball bearings. Maybe we'll find out in here. But and then it's a split rim. You just undo that ring of bolts and the rim half separate. In theory, they're probably rusted together right now, but we shall see. Okay, so nothing can ever be simple. The cotter pin, I tried to unfold it and everything just broke off. So luckily, there was so little left of it, the nut just sheared it off when I spun it off with the impact. So now it's going to be a matter of how well does this pin come out. This could be interesting. Don't just want to drive on the end of the shaft. Can't put weight on it because that's counterproductive, but that would hold it from I knew this wasn't going to be that easy. Okay, I got it to start moving. Might end up having to touch the threads up a little bit on the end, but this doubling up brass hammers protects it about as good as I can get it and get a decent whack on it. And what do you do from here? Okay, I gave up trying to get the dang thing apart on the mower. Decided it was just going to be easier to come put it in the press before I hurt something beyond repair. Which obviously you can't heat it because, you know, it's a wheel and there's bearings. And there's no real way to get a hold of it. I figured it was just going to need to get started, and then once you got it started, it would just go. I bet I could probably tap it out from there because it ain't taking any force to move it. Okay, so I got everything apart and cleaned up. Shaft cleaned up good. Threads cleaned up. I cleaned the threads up in the nut. It did take me a minute to refine the cotter pin because once I got everything cleaned up, it blended in with the threads. So it took me a minute, but I found it. Ended up having to drill the cotter pin out. I tried driving it out. It did not move. Drilled halfway through it, tried to drive the rest of the way out, would not move. I ended up drilling all the way through it. But anyway, I was kind of impressed. They got these cute little tapered roller bearings with integral seals in there. I figured, sure as shit for what it was, they'd be some captured, just cheapo ball bearings, since it's just a pressed steel rim, but they proved me wrong. So I'll have to repack those when we go to put it back together. So I guess we'll see if these nuts are going to come apart. Oh yeah. And we'll just replace all these guys since they're kind of crusty. At least I think we've got fine thread nuts down there. The thing that always scares me about doing these rims is them nuts are going to be stuck and you're going to go to bust one loose and you're going to break the stud off because they're not through bolts. They're just, of course, I guess, looks like they are just press them. So I guess technically you probably could replace them. And then you got that driver notch there. So you take, where's the big punch? Hang tight. Well, in theory anyhow. Actually, I might have been. I need a block that fits. It doesn't help when you're driving the bead against the table, huh? Now, well, it moves. It's hung up on the tire now. And there's your two rim halves. In all honesty, they're really not in that bad a shape. The outer half, the bead's in a little worse for wear, but should be able to wire brush that up. And with some Murphy's on there, since Murphy's has anti-rust, or has rust inhibitor in it, should be good. So I'm gonna clean that up real quick and we'll mount the other tire up. Okay, so mounting these things up is kind of a bear. You got to put the tube in first. And then, I don't know if this is a necessity, but I found that it helps if you put just enough air in it to round the tube to somewhat eliminate the possibility when you put the halves together of pinching the tubes in between the rim halves. Pinching the tube, not tubes. Just, like I say, just a little bit, not a lot. And then we will put a little bit of slick 'em on. Like I say, the nice thing about Murphy's is it's got a rust inhibitor in it, so it'll keep it from rusting on the bead again. Although it's not going to sit for the period of time that it sat prior to this, and the barn that it's going in is going to be a lot drier than the one that it sat in for all those years, so should be able to keep the rust to a minimum. And at some point, probably similar to the crimper, this thing will probably come apart and get repainted, just because it, I don't know. This is right there in that zone of do you or don't you. So once you get all this done, you can fish that in there like that, because you got to get, if you put this side on first and get the valve stem in, then you don't fight trying to line the bolts up and get the valve stem in the whole 9 yards while you're putting the halves together. And it just goes together like that. But I'm gonna go get some new nuts and lock washers, just because these things are pretty deteriorated. And since the tube was pre-inflated, you shouldn't have to worry about it being pinched. I guess we'll see how bad it looks inflated. Oops. Just gotta make sure not to shove the tube in. And the beads on these don't really pop when they seat, so it gives you kind of a false sense of how much air is in there. So it's about 20 pounds. That should be plenty for what it's carrying. A little bit of stubble damage on the sidewalls, but other than that, heck of a lot better than the tires that came off of it. And now we gotta repack our little bearings. Things are so tiny I can't even see them up in the packer. And these things do show a little bit of water pitting, but they're still tight. The cages aren't overly loose. If it was a trailer and you were going to go pull it 70 mile an hour down the highway, probably want to replace them. For a sickle mower that has no weight to it and you're only ever going to pull it 12 mile an hour down the road, they'll be just fine. The seals are still decent, they're not cracked, so they'll be okay. Okay, let's see how much of a bear this wants to be. Hopefully, now that everything's cleaned up, it just slides right together. So we got the axle and the spacer. Naturally, the spacer can't go with the tire in the way. And another spacer. Ow. And a finger. And I'm guessing the way this is set up, you just set your wheel bearings like a normal wheel bearing. You just pinch everything together, and that don't feel too bad. Just need to throw a cotter pin in it. So that's one side. Now I just got to do the other. So apparently I picked the hard one to do first just by chance. Did that one. Cotter pin pulled right out. Nut came right off. Smacked the axle one time with a brass hammer, and it went halfway out the rim, and I tapped it out the rest of the way with a punch and a small ball peen. Really, the only thing I fought on this side was apparently paint holds on to tires better than rust, because there was basically no rust inside that rim, and I kind of fought getting the rim split a little bit. But other than that, bearings in this side were in better shape. Apparently that's the side that sat up against the wall when it was in the barn, and that drew all the moisture. But they are a dang sight better than the ones that were on it. So I don't know how, and they closed up, the cracks closed up a fair bit once you got the air out of it, but you can definitely tell it sat flat in that spot because the tire's compressed right here. So, like I say, luckily these sat on their side with no air in them, so they didn't flat spot. And the only part, or only spot that might be concerning, and I doubt I'll be able to find it now, oh, right here, it's a little, there's like a dent in the side and there's some spider cracks, but that's the only bad spot I see in the tires. So apparently Teeter needed to come out and say hi because she was barking up a storm. So anyhow, with that, I basically made it as far as I can make it on this for the time being, until my bolts show up to start putting guards back on. I probably should have looked in Shoop to see if they had them, because they carry a lot of those oddball sized bolts because farm equipment uses a lot of odd sized bolts. So they probably had them. But, oh well, such is life. They were supposed, like I say, they're supposed to be here Monday. Hopefully, if they get here, should be able to bang the rest of this out pretty quick, I would hope. Because we know everything will fit right because we're putting the part back on that came off of it. So, fingers crossed. Weather's supposed to be fairly decent this week. They're talking a pretty major, I shouldn't say major, well, major compared to today, warm up. So, got stuff to do on the barn tomorrow. Actually, basically, if the weather cooperates, I got some barn / outdoor at the house projects planned for all weekend. Should hopefully get some tractor action, as long as the ground isn't too wet after this little bit of snow we had. Which the field I need to go to isn't chisel plowed, so we should be okay. So yeah, that's what we got coming up for the weekend. So with that being said, that's it for this one, and we'll catch you guys on the next one, and hopefully we can finish this thing up because it's taking way longer than what I wanted it to. But it seems like all the projects I've been working on since after the first of the year have taken way longer than what I wanted to. Other than the starter for the 1950T, that went beautiful. Everything else has turned into a cluster. So anyhow, with that being said, that's it for this one. I'll catch you guys on the next one.